Welcome everybody. I'm so excited that you're here. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about sentence stalking, which is using mentor sentences to teach grammar and vocabulary to middle school students. I'm going to make my screen big so that you can see everything that I'm talking about here. So there might be a couple of different reasons why you may have clicked on this video if you're interested about a different approach to teach grammar to middle school students. The first reason might be because you feel like grammar is taught in isolation. It's this random thing that you do to check off what you taught and then just be able to move on. You've maybe diagrammed sentences, taught every single part of speech until you're blue in the face, sing songs, dance, the whole shebang. However, it might feel like a foreign concept that students memorize for an assessment and never end up transferring into their actual writing. Another reason that you might be here today is because maybe grammar scares you a little bit. You read a standard like form and use verbs in the indicative, imperative, interrogative, conditional, and subjunctive mood, and your mind, and that's actually a standard from the language standards in 8th grade. And your mind immediately thinks, how am I going to teach this to my students when I can't really even understand it myself and know how I transfer it into my own writing? Grammar is so intimidating that you busy yourself and your students with the high demands that already exist for reading and writing. And sometimes maybe you just pretend that grammar isn't even there or that you cover it through editing writing. So maybe you're in a bit of avoidance. Possibly you're here today because you've read a bunch of articles and books about teaching grammar and have tried some really progressive types of methods that sound great on paper, but then when you try them out in your classroom, the method doesn't go over how you think it's going to. You need a mix between practical and purposeful, something that can be part of a consistent daily routine and actually work for all of your students. So you are in the right place with this video if you are any of these different situations that I just talked about, or maybe you're several of them. I'm going to offer you a solution today that you can walk away and have a nice plan moving forward with how to teach grammar to your students. Hi, I'm Casey, and I just want to introduce myself. Few things about me. I'm in my 13th year in education. I've always taught middle school language arts. I'm also in my 8th year as a middle school literacy coach. I've taught everything from 6th grade to 8th grade across my 13 years in education. I really like to present, consult, and create curriculum. I'm a certified middle school literacy coach, and I also have a master's degree with a reading emphasis and am a certified K-12 reading interventionist. So I want to start by telling you a little bit about my journey with grammar. When I first started teaching, I was passed down and told to use what could only be described as drill and kill worksheets. My students memorized the parts of speech rhyme. I questioned how I had become an English teacher and known for being a good writer, but I had to study just to come up with the answer key for my 8th graders. After that, I just ignored teaching grammar altogether and claimed that editing student work and doing writing conferences was enough. Next, I tried out a concept called interactive edit and used mentor sentences and had students make a list about what they noticed. And I started to see it make some difference in my students' writing. I read all of Jeff Anderson's books, and I knew I was getting closer and evolving on my grammar teaching journey, but I still felt a bit disjointed and lost. So my teaching of grammar felt random. So although I liked the strategy, my students that really struggled with interactive edit. And I think it was because I was so open-ended. That's when I started to take my practice of interactive edit and meld it into a more practical classroom tool by adding in focus questions with the mentor sentences. And this is where I found my sweet spot with grammar instruction. And today I'm going to be sharing all the details of how you would go about doing this. So it is possible to be progressive with your teaching, but to do it in a way that's going to work with your classroom systems and middle school students. I live in this world, and I'm not just someone out of the classroom who's disconnected from the realities of what teaching in middle school is like. I teach it every day, so I come to you with this strategy, knowing that I've discovered it through trial and error. And I know that you have to have that mix of purposeful and practical. So can you imagine your grammar instruction checking off all of these boxes? It would be aligned to the Common Core state standards. It would be a seamless part of your everyday classroom routine. It would be something that all students can experience some level of success with. It would be a bridge between your reading, writing, and grammar. There wouldn't be these disjointed pieces. You would see students transferring it to their reading and writing, and it would be fun and engaging for students as well. So let's get into what is sentence stalking. So in Jeff Anderson's book, Mechanically Inclined, he credits Vicki Spandau, who's the developer of the 6 traits writing model, for coming up with the term sentence stalking. It's described as showing students a great mentor sentence, and this could be from a book, a newspaper, from student writing. It can really be from anywhere, and having students notice what the writer did to create that sentence and why. So why do I think sentence stalking is the way to go? Grammar instruction time is time taken out of an already limited time for English language arts teachers. I've talked with a lot of English language arts teachers from around the United States, and the number one question I get asked is, how do you fit it all in? And the amount of time given to some language arts teachers is an absolute crime. Some have as little as 45 minutes to teach reading and writing and word study. Most teachers teach one content area, but as ELA teachers, we are expected to cover so much. Our standards include reading literature, reading informational text, writing, speaking and listening, and language standards. To make grammar instruction just one other random isolated thing is not even feasible, nor does it make any sense. Sentence stalking is not just one other thing. It can actually become the piece of your literacy framework that intertwines everything else together. So I'm going to start by just showing you a traditional DOL example. It might look something like this. Students are given this sentence as a handout, or maybe it's projected for them, and they begin to find and correct the errors. They recognize that dad shouldn't be capitalized, that there's the wrong type of there, and there should be a comma after house to join together the independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction. Park shouldn't be capitalized, and instead is spelled wrong. So why is this practice bad? Why am I saying that sentence stalking should be the new DOL and you should replace sentence stalking with old practices like this? For one thing, the sentence used in the example is just a plain old sentence with nothing special about it. My dad is going over to their house, but I am going to the park instead. So it's not a great sentence to start with, and DOL sentences really aren't. Real writing, even students' worst writing, doesn't look like this and have this many different types of errors. So here's a crazy thought. If you want students to learn how to edit, do an editing mini lesson in your writing instruction with an authentic student writing sample in the genre of writing you're doing for that writing unit. Not an isolated sentence and expect them to be able to transfer it into editing writing. This is a topic for a whole other day, but the argument that DOL prepares students to edit writing just doesn't necessarily jive with me. I don't know about you, but my spelling has gotten worse since I've become a middle school English language arts teacher. I've seen words spelled just about every way you can imagine, and I know you have too. So what is the effect of this on our brains? Our brains literally see the word spelled so many different ways that we begin to question ourselves on how to spell words. Our brains soak in every visual thing that we see. So why would we want our students' brains to start out the class period every day with the image of a sentence that shows them how to be a horrible writer? I'm just going to throw those different points out there, and this is why I'm not for traditional DOL. So here's an example of what sentence stalking would look like. This mentor sentence comes from Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. I'll read it out loud. The toad, as if it saw their interview was over, stirred again, bunched up, and bounced itself off clumsily toward the wood. The possibilities of what students can take away from this sentence are endless. So if you put this sentence up on the board and even put the question out there of like, what do you notice? They can notice things like there's commas for adding in extra information. They can notice what type of there is used. They can look at clumsily and think about why that might be a good adverb to use. They can look at how to spell the word toward. It's kind of one of those commonly misspelled words. They could look at how the author lists actions, the pronouns that are in the sentence structure, the writer's craft, etc., etc., etc. So why does using the practice of sentence stalking with mentor sentences work better than DOL or prescriptive grammar worksheets? When you do sentence stalking, first of all, writing is a little messy. It's not prescriptive. We often make a huge mistake when we teach grammar because prescriptive sentences that are used really don't transfer to writing, because that's not what the author in our books, that's not how authors in books they read actually write. And it's not how we want students to write either. Also, it asks students to dig into the grammar and conventions, but it also asks students to look at word choice, vocabulary, figurative language, and really writer's craft. It's a great way for students to analyze what writers do. In Mechanically Inclined, Jeff Anderson says, all students need to be sentence stalkers, finding them in all students need to be sentence stalkers, finding them in literature and the world. So think about how human beings are. We observe and we imitate what we see. Why would teaching students writing be any different than that? And finally, it is that bridge that intertwines multiple standard sets together, that reading, writing, grammar, speaking, and listening, it can all come together with the practice of sentence stalking. So if you're thinking, it sounds awesome, how do I do it? Let's talk about what this would look like in your classroom. So the first thing you need to do if you want to implement the practice of sentence stalking is that you need to go on a mentor sentence hunt. So mentor sentences can be anywhere. They can be in popular middle school books, interactive read aloud books that you're reading to your class. One of my favorite things is to actually share a sentence from our read aloud for that day, and it connects the interactive read aloud in, and students get excited that when they experience that sentence in the reading for that day. It can be from class novels, guided reading books, literature circle books, magazines, newspapers, student writing. So whether you do read alouds, class novels, guided reading, or literature circles, you could have your own copy of the book and highlight and underline sentences that pop and make you say, wow, when you read them. This will be an easy way to develop a mentor sentence collection, or even better, grab a notebook and make it your mentor sentence notebook and just jot the sentences you love down in the notebook. Or if you're a more techie person, you could do this in a Google Doc. If you are on a team of teachers, you could have a shared Google Doc that you're all kind of pouring different mentor sentences into. So for me, I do an interactive read aloud every day. So as I kind of explained before, what I do is I look ahead to the chapter that I'll be reading to students for the day, and I select a sentence that students will hear in the next chapter. It's so fun because students get so excited when they hear the sentence. And it also allows students to sometimes make a prediction about what is going to happen in the next chapter of reading, just from that sentence I share. If it's during a writing unit, I often pull a sentence from the mentor text I am using for that specific writing unit. I also try to align it so that if the writing mini lesson for the day is adding in transition words and phrases, the sentence I select would be a sentence that contains transition words and phrases. You know, if we're writing a persuasive essay and the mini lesson is revising for a persuasive essay, or for persuasive voice, I would find a sentence that maybe contains persuasive word choice to use for sentence stalking that day. Another hack that I love is to select a few standards you want to focus on during each interactive read aloud and look through your interactive read aloud book through the lens of finding sentences that contain the feature of the standard you want to cover. So for example, if I know I want to focus on a certain comma rule, such as listing items in a series, I can look through the book and find sentences that contain commas to list items in a series. Students will get other things out of sentences too, but I might highlight several sentences in a row that all focus on that same comma rule, so students are exposed to it through the mentor sentences several days in a row. If I know that I do 5 interactive read alouds throughout the school year and attach several language standards to focus on during each interactive read aloud. It's a simple way to know that I am exposing students to all the standards across the school year. The mentor sentences that you should find are sentences that stick with you. The sentences that make you say, that gave me all the feels, or it would be awesome if students did that in their writing. It's kind of you'll know it when you see it kind of thing for the sentences that you find. So I have in my mentor sentence rule 3 big things. So it's based on language standards. Our instruction should hit on a couple of big topics. So here are some of the topics that I look for when I'm trying to find mentor sentences. So parts of speech, punctuation, spelling patterns, capitalization, analyzing, writer's craft, sentence structure, vocabulary using context clues, root words, prefixes, suffixes, figurative language, and more. So this is all the big stuff. So my rule is there should be 3 of these main things contained within one sentence in order for me to pick it out as a mentor sentence. So if I'm looking at these things as a whole, it should contain at least 3 different pieces of these things that students would pick up. And then the next thing that I do is I come up with focus questions. So sentence stalking, as I've read about it in Jeff Anderson's work and as an interactive edit in Fontes and Pinnell's work, talks about putting up the mentor sentence and then posing questions to students like, what do you notice? What do you like about this sentence? What sticks with you about this sentence? And I love it. I really, really do. I spent years using mentor sentences this way. So my students were awesome at noticing a lot about sentences, but if I'm completely honest, it felt really random. It did feel like we were covering specific standards. It felt like I had students that were amazing at noticing intricate things, and other students who were good at noticing that the sentence contained a capital letter at the beginning and a period at the end every single day. That's when I asked myself, how can I not ditch this whole concept that I love, but make it more practical and systematic for my classroom? That's when I started to ask 3 to 5 focus questions to my students about the mentor sentence of the day. The last question would always be, what else do you notice about this sentence? So that I still incorporated that open-ended question for students to get creative and take it to their level. So here are a few examples of focus questions that go along with the mentor sentence from the previous slide. So think about the 3 big things that you noticed about the mentor sentence that made you select it in the first place, and turn those big things into focus questions that students can answer about the sentence. The last question could be open-ended, like what else do you notice? Focus questions sometimes require more than a straightforward answer, but an explanation too. So for me, adding in this focus question with the mentor sentences were a total game changer. When I switched from the what do you notice to focus questions, I saw a complete transformation in students' attitude towards sentence stalking and the effort they put into it. The questions helped them to focus and learn the things I needed them to take away from the mentor sentence. While the last open-ended question always blew my mind to hear what else they noticed that I may have not even thought of myself. So one recommendation when you're starting out with sentence stalking is to start slow for success later. So on day 1, when you're introducing this to students, I would just model your thinking aloud to students as you look at the mentor sentence and answer the focus question, and write down your answers for them on some sort of projector or type them out. And students would just observe this and just observe what it takes for a thought process, what strong answers would look like to the focus questions, and you're just purely modeling this. On day 2, you would pair students with partners or small groups and have them look at the mentor sentence and the focus questions and answer them together. And then on day 3, you would look at establishing a daily routine and show students what sentence stalking will look like daily in your classroom. And you really spend time on what that routine would look like. So here is a daily sentence stalking structure, that routine that you can use in your classroom. So copying down the sentences helps students notice and focus on what is capitalized, how things are spelled, where punctuation is located. So I love having students write down the mentor sentence if possible. The next one is sentence stalking isn't isolated grammar instruction. You will be spiraling back to the same grammar concepts again and again. and covering a variety of concepts each day. As adults, how often do we Google it? Give this same opportunity by putting together a reference guide for them with items such as comma rules, punctuation rules, grammar rules, parts of speech, figurative language, reference guide, and then you can even put up anchor charts with these concepts as well, and teach them to use their resources and dig for the answer when they don't know it right in their head right away. So you are going to be asking these questions every day, these focus questions, and sometimes you're going to feel like, but I really haven't taught my students this yet. And that might be true, but as you go over the answers, you are going to give a teaching point with it, and I'll show you that in a second. And also, you're going to be spiraling back to these same types of questions again and again. And let's be honest, like, students aren't going to remember everything. So this concept of having a reference guide that they're referring to is a really good technique, because that's just a life skill. So if you finish early, pick an extension. So there's you can have an extension menu of, write a sentence that mimics this type of sentence, or go into your independent reading book and find a sentence that has a similar concept as the mentor sentence for the day. And then the next part is a turn and talk with Sentence Stalking partner. So with the turn and talk, maybe use one quick prompt. This quick turn and talk will give students more confidence to share out as a whole class and more engaged during the whole class share out. So you could just say, all right, guys, I want you to talk about focus question number 3. What did you get and why? And have students talk about that before filling it out as a whole class. And as you're going through it as a class, you could have students write in the answers as they go if they had an incorrect answer. And that's also when you're giving the teaching points and discussing. And then I love kind of finishing it out with a final partner share out. A perfect question is just share one thing that you learned today that you didn't know, or one thing that maybe you knew, but it refreshed your memory today. So Sentence Stalking has something for everybody. It's an instructional practice that every student, regardless of their ability level, can achieve success with and get better at day by day. So it's not going to look the same for everybody, but there will be things that all students can achieve some level of success at. You can also use monthly reflections to check in with students to see how they're understanding or not understanding the different concepts and how they're transferring what they're learning from sentence stalking into their writing. Definitely look for connection points with sentence stalking. During writing workshop, use opportunities to pair mentor sentences with the mini lesson for the day. During writing conferences and guided writing, keep mentor sentences that students have been exposed to near your conferring area, and don't hesitate to pull out a mentor sentence and reference it to help illustrate a teaching point to students during a one-on-one or small group setting. During reading workshop, encourage students to use word solving techniques, practice in sentence stalking when they come upon an unknown word. Ask questions through reading mini lessons, reading conferences, and guided reading that ask students to think about author's craft in specific places in the book that they're reading. And encourage students to become sentence stalkers. The ultimate win in using sentence stalking is when students bring a post-it note of a sentence they found that they think would make a great sentence for the class to use. Also, think about speaking and listening with this. Give students talking with each other and sharing their thinking before and after you go over the focus questions as a whole class. So if you're sitting here and thinking, like, this all sounds great, Casey, but let's start with the first one. I don't have time. I don't have time to scour literature for mentor sentences and develop focus questions and create a student grammar guide. Trust me, I totally get it. Teachers are expected to do all the things, and sometimes doing all the things is not possible. This is why you read an article, do a book study, attend a PD session, listen to a webinar, listen to a YouTube video, and get all excited, but then you go back to your classroom and get bombarded by parent emails, license coursework, creating day-to-day lesson plans for reading and writing, keeping up with the demands of your district. And all of a sudden, the amazing idea that you learned about and wanted to implement stays just that, an amazing idea. So pretty soon you look back at your notes and decide to recycle them because you can barely remember what you learned about, and know you most certainly don't have any time to try and remember and implement it now. So this is why I want to share with you what I spent a couple of years of my life in my free time developing. And this is 180 days of sentence stalking that I have created. So the resource that I'm talking about contains 180 different mentor sentences. There's one for each day of the school year. Each mentor sentence comes with 5 focus questions, and then there's also an answer key for every single question. All the coordinating resources needed to make this a slam dunk are also included. The books that I pulled sentences from are taken from The Hunger Games, Wonder, Out of My Mind, The Tiger Rising, The Fault in Our Stars, Hatchet, Tuck Everlasting, Walk Two Moons, Counting by Sevens, and A Long Walk to Water. And every single day has the Common Core State Standard. Each question is itemized by which standard it aligns to. So the resource also comes with a sentence stalking guide. So if you want to set up sentence stalking on your own, but love the idea of students having a reference guide to use, I also have just a student stalking reference guide available. A reference guide takes the pressure off of teaching students everything, and showing students how to use this resource to find their own answers is such a skill. This is a skill we are missing out in education right now. Students need to be resourceful and look for the answer when they don't know it off the top of their head. And we shouldn't always expect students to memorize. Included, I also have a bilingual sentence stalking student guide that's translated in Spanish. So I'm going to give you just a little peek into what the sentence stalking guide looks like. So it has a figurative language quick reference sheet, common homophones, capitalization rules, comma rules, commonly misspelled words list, punctuation, types of sentences, parts of speech, affixes, prefixes, Greek and Latin root words, and then writer's craft and vocabulary sheets, and a place that they can even record their takeaways and grammar rules that they find that maybe aren't included in there. So this resource takes that really good PD idea that you had and you learned about and you want to try out in your classroom, and it makes it actually possible to have it as a classroom reality without taking away precious time that you need to spend doing all of the other things, and still try to maintain somewhat of a life outside of school as well. So the language standards for the Common Core are broken down into the convention standards, which are more writing conventions and grammar, and the knowledge of language, which is all about solving words, vocabulary, using reference materials, coming up with definitions, and checking words, etc. So often we assume teaching the language standards is all about teaching writing conventions and grammar, when in reality, there is so much more than that. So this resource contains questions that spiral to these concepts again and again, using different mentor sentences across the 180 days. So it takes all those pieces into account. So here's an example of one day of sentence stalking. As you can see, each day includes the mentor sentence with 5 focus questions and a place for a sentence stalking extension. Additionally, the answer key is written out as teaching points in friendly, straightforward language. It's definitely more than just an answer key. So I'm going to show you a sneak peek inside these resources. So it comes in a couple of different formats. The first format are daily sheets that are printed out every single day, and students can pick up on their way into class or keep in a binder to reference again and again. So I'll show you what those look like. I must not have had those linked right. I'm sorry about that. I did have what those looked like on the slide before this, though, where you can see that this is what the daily sheet looks like, where there's the question and then the 5 focus questions are on there, and then the answer key, the stuff that's highlighted, are all the different teaching points that really help you explain each concept to students as needed. Another piece would be the weekly sheets. So the weekly sheets are, if you want to save paper and they're just formatted a little bit differently with the mentor sentence and then a place for students to write their responses for the focus questions. Another format I have is the presentation format, where students you can present the mentor sentence and you can present the focus questions to students, and then they can just be writing down their answers like in a notebook. For if you have a notebook for your class, they can just be writing them down on there. And then the last format I have is multiple choice with Google Form quizzes and automatic grading. So I want to show you what that looks like. So this comes with every single one of the 180 days. So it has a place where students could enter in their email if you collect that, type in their name if you collect that, and then they go through and read the question. So the mentor sentence is on the top. Via fell asleep too, and mom and dad talked quietly about grown-up things I didn't care about. So why is there a comma after asleep? Via fell asleep too, and mom and dad talked quietly about grown-up things I didn't care about. So is it to separate an interrupting word from the rest of the sentence, to separate an introductory word from the rest of the sentence, to separate the name of someone being addressed from the rest of the sentence? So you would look back at the sentence and you would decide why that comma is there. And then you go through and answer the rest. Why is to used instead of to or two? And you pick the answer that you think is right. Why is there a comma after to? I'm just going to randomly click here and the rest to show you guys what it looks like once you submit. So once you press submit, it will come up and you can say view accuracy, and then students will have the same view. So they'll see if they got the question right, and then they will also see the feedback where it has that explanation of why that answer is correct. So whether they get it right or wrong, they still see that feedback with the explanation. And also you could use, you could have them grade and transfer this into Google Classroom as well. So my promise with Sentence Stalking is you will never see sentences the same, and your students will never see sentences the same either. There will be transfer into student writing. It'll change perspective on how you read, because you'll be looking for awesome sentences. And it'll also increase student collaboration in your classroom, and it will make your life easier. Definitely go into my Teachers Pay Teachers store and go read the reviews about what people are saying about using Sentence Stalking in their classroom. Teachers are loving it, so definitely go check that out. There's 3 different ways you can purchase Sentence Stalking. You can purchase as individual months. Each month contains 20 days of Sentence Stalking for $10 each for those monthly Sentence Stalking resources. You can purchase a 3-month mini bundle for $25 and save $5, or you can purchase the entire 9-month bundle for $60 and save $30. This can be found on my Teachers Pay Teachers store. You can find that at bit.ly/KCKASEYTPT. I'll put the link down in the description of the video. And then here's my contact information. Definitely go check me out on my website. Follow me on Instagram, Teachers Pay Teachers. Shoot me an email if you have any questions. Follow me on Facebook, whatever platform you use. I'd love to connect with you and answer any questions that you might have. I want to just end by saying thank you so much for spending some time with me by watching this video. I know that time is the most valued commodity that teachers have, so I really appreciate you being here with me. Hope that everybody has a great day, and I'll see you back next time.